Good morning, grasshoppers. Well, today we're starting with a quick instructive stream on Smyslov-Rudakovsky, an amazing game which made quite an impression on me when I first saw it. And it also made an impression on one of my students, Lilia Poteet, who won more girls' national championships than anyone other than Rochelle Ballantine, whom she tied with in the number of girls' national championships. In the Kasparov Girls Nationals, I think they both won every title all the way up from under age 8 or under age 10 all the way through under age 18. And they made quite an impression on the girls who moved on, as Kimmy and others who also stream, Alice Dong, Mari Chess, who were also there at the time, Alexandra Botez, many others who were there at the time. I don't remember seeing Andrea Botez, or at least I wasn't necessarily friends with her as I was with Alexandra Botez, from Susan Polgar's Lubbock chess invitationals, which was much harder to get to. Now, the book, Most Instructive Chess Games of All Ever Played, by Irving Chernev, is written mainly for the rated 1,000 or 1,200 to 1,800 category for the best possible effect. But these games, of course, are very amusing and very instructive for all levels. Smyslov was an amazing positional player, and he was not without faults, of course. As in this particular example, he begins the game with e4 in 1945 in Moscow. Rudakovsky answers with the asymmetrical c5, known as the Sicilian defense. Now, black, of course, is fighting for the center without attempting to reach symmetry, as after the move knight f3, e6, d4, c takes d4, knight takes d4, white assumes control of a space advantage in the center. And the space advantage is critical, given that white has given up one of two center pawns. Two center pawns in the center constitute a space advantage for certain. The knight has already improved its worth on the 4th rank, equaling a bishop, reaching into the opponent's position. And after the moves knight c3 and d6, knight f6, knight c3 and d6, black plays an opening which is almost never seen today, the Skavenigan defense. The Skavenigan defense may not be seen today at any level because of what? Number 6 move. I will let you choose the 6th move in this particular position. Your goal is to find several moves. In fact, there are about 6 or 8 very playable moves in this particular position for white. So you're looking for 6 moves. There is one move that was preferred by Karpov almost routinely until he decided to put the kibosh on Garry Kasparov in most of these positions with a move that was invented by Paul Keres. Paul Keres decided to speed up the attack given the placement of the pawn on e6. Now, the normal approaches against the Sicilian are still available. What's interesting about this is that after the 1984 match that lasted 48 games, took about 6 months, Kasparov gave up playing the Skavenigan, which had rewarded him throughout his entire career, and in favor of the Najdorf. And in favor of the Najdorf, Karpov continued with his universal bishop e2 move. And Kasparov, of course, didn't mind at all playing against that, as then he would revert after a6, bishop to e2, to the Skavenigan with d6. And these structures he knows extremely well. In fact, they reoccurred in the World Championship match with Anand versus Kasparov in 1995 in the World Trade Center, where I was the press room officer, thanks to a generous offer by international arbiter and organizer Sophia Rode, who was working with the PCA at the time, and international master John Donaldson and I commandeered the press room, and I got to meet and interact with all of the best chess players in the world. And I had a little bit more quality time with Miguel Najdorf at that tournament. Needless to say, our moves in this particular position, as it should be noted, the move G4 puts the Skovanegan pretty much out of business, at least positionally. Many years ago in the World Open, I had a player who was rated less than 2200, probably about 2180, I believe. He played the Skovanegan against me, and I just looked up at him and said, "What?" And in my mind, I said, you can't play that." Now, it had been years since I really had to study, because I had been playing D4 on and off. Also, the ins and outs of the Kara's attack. But basically, I played the Kara's attack and I mopped up my opponent in certainly less than 30 moves. Not quite a miniature. But I didn't need to know the theory, as the attack somewhat plays itself and creates problems for black that one can address over the board at any time. Other moves, of course, that can be played are Bishop C4, and Bishop G5 is still on the cards. F4 is, of course, perfectly playable. Bishop to E3, the English attack, is of course very standard. There's no knight to G4 in these lines. However, G3 followed by knight to C6. White often plays the move H3 with a later G4. So this gave Paul Keres the inspiration to just play the move G4 straight away and put the Keres attack out of business. So in an effort to avoid the Keres attack, Garry Kasparov would play the Najdorf. Oh, I realized that I showed the wrong move order. Garry Kasparov would play the Najdorf earlier. This is the actual move order of the Najdorf. I didn't mean to mislead anyone with A6 earlier. And only after Bishop E2 would he play the move E6. This was the correction on the earlier faux pas, where I just backed up one move and played A6 with E6 and A6 on the board. It was actually this particular position after knight C3 the Najdorf occurs. And obviously G4 is not in the cards. However, Shirov and many others still favor the move G4 even after Bishop E2. And of course the English attack, Bishop C4, Bishop G5, and all of those moves are still available to us. Smyslov's opponent, however, chose E6, and after D4, C takes D4, knight takes D4, knight F6, putting pressure on the pawn on E4, knight C3, E6, we reach the Skovanegan, and Smyslov follows the age-old universal Sicilian treatment of Bishop E2, which was also what Lilia Poteet used to defeat her first master at an early age of about 10. She had the plan of castling F4, Rook F3, and Rook G3, and she mopped up her opponent in this particular line very, very well. She didn't actually play the Keres attack against the Skovanegan. When she faced it over the board, she played just like Smyslov versus Rudakovsky for the most part. Now, black has many choices in this position, one of which is to prepare castling and both sides castle. After Bishop E2, Bishop E7, castles, white has to choose how to continue developing their pieces with Bishop E3, Knight C6, F4, and now we reach the crux of the position where black just has to choose how they are going to continue. And Smyslov's opponent chooses a rather lackluster move in the sense that Queen to C7 perhaps isn't as forceful as the move E5. With the move E5, white will simply continue to hold the center with knight to B3. And something along these lines falls into place in our game after the move Queen to C7, as white now has to choose how they're going to continue. Now, The most popular move in this particular position is king h1, in a very Karpovian sense, giving a square to the bishop to retreat to on g1 if necessary. However, Smyslov chose the rather forward-looking, in his youth, forward-looking queen to e1, intending queen to g3 with a further attack on the king's side. Whether or not this actually happens matters not, as black simplified the position with knight takes d4, bishop takes d4, and a counterpunch in the center with e5. Now, bishop e3 and or f takes e5 are both very reasonable. F takes e5, d takes e5, queen to g3 would fulfill white's strategy of queen e1 to queen g3, pinning the pawn to the queen, and black should answer this with bishop c5. And that will also defend. Note the pin on the pawn in this particular position. And after a move like bishop takes queen takes king h1, the position's still extremely level. There is a threat of rook takes f6, so black might step out of the center rather than retreat the knight backwards. And then white can actually strive for more queenside space with b4, or with rook on a to d1, occupy the open file. Getting back to our game after the move e5, rather than playing f takes e5 and simplifying things, it is very common to keep the pieces on the board and retreat the bishop and bring another rook to the center and continue our attack on the king side with queen g3 later. Now, in this particular position, it is far better for black to exchange on f4 and then play bishop e6. The weakness of d6 is countermanded by the isolated pawn on e4, which black will also try to target, as well as activating his rooks. But rather than playing this move, the unfortunate move bishop to e6 was essayed by Rudakovsky. And Chernev opens the chapter with a quote by Nemzovich by saying that the knight on c3 is committed to going to d5 whenever black presents the opportunity. So the first move by Smyslov to grab space on the king's side is f5, and after bishop takes e4, queen takes e4, we can already see that white's plan could be in play. Let's just for a moment take a few seconds to either pause the video or choose candidate moves for white in this position. Remember, our goal was to reach d5 safely with the knight or in a protected fashion, so the top three moves in this position involve either the d file or the d5 square, or bothering the black queen in some fashion. But in general, your choices. And now, once you've got your three choices, remember, you're not looking for the best move. You're just looking for all the good moves in the position to compare them. And once you have all the good moves, and then you set about a certain time frame for analysis to compare them, then you'll actually essay your move. But you cannot compare moves if you don't choose more than one to compare them to. For example, looking at only one move is like in a dart game. You're allowed 3 darts in a dart game per player. No one in their right mind, although this could be a good handicap for a much, much stronger player, could play with only 1 dart, for example, and always hitting a bullseye for 50 points, rather than using 3 darts to try to collect as many points as you possibly can. So in this particular position, if you didn't already know, we are going to remove the defender of d5 with the help of our bishop. Black chooses to guard the bishop that is unprotected behind the knight, and in this particular position, this allows white to leap in to the f6, to the d5 square, attacking f6 and c7. Obviously, if queen takes c2, there will be a little bit of a threat of the knight reaching c7 as well. So there are some problems in this position. The ideas of rook f2 and rook to c1 attacking the queen would certainly secure the c7 square for the knight, so Rudakovsky retreats. White secures his c2 pawn against any possible attacks, and black then begins a minority attack. Now, in this particular position, there is more than one move that could be played. Obviously, we could tuck our king away, we could begin with an immediate rook lift, or, as Smyslov played, we could kick the queen back, preventing any possible b4, a5 and b4, as the knight is also resisting, and tuck our king away into the corner. It's at this moment when Smyslov could probably use a better move than the one that he played. He played the ever so natural rook to c8, and everyone knows what I think about natural moves. Just in case you don't know what I think about natural moves without thinking, when you play natural moves without thinking, they can often lead to natural disasters. And that's not what we're playing chess for. In this particular position, we're looking for candidate moves for white. And we will take a moment's pause of at least 45 seconds to choose several moves in this position that we might continue playing with, either centralizing, attacking, or regrouping, or relocating our pieces in a manner that suits us for the most part. Again, you're not looking for the best move, the absolute best move, when you're looking at all the candidate moves, because you need all of the candidate moves to compare, and all of the candidate moves that you used in the past are still candidate moves now, and you build a stockpile. Every unused candidate move becomes part of a catalog of attacking ideas that can be essayed at any point in the future if you need to use them. In this particular position, although we could try to crash through right away, Smyslov chose the rather prosaic rook lift, rook to f3, intending just rook to g3 or rook to h3, putting pressure on either the g7 or h7 pawns. Black misses yet another opportunity to try to slow down the attack with f6 and tucks his king away into the corner, and it's at this moment that Smyslov decides to stop f6 permanently and centralize, or I'm sorry, regroup and relocate his queen to the king side. Black chooses to use the open file. We're going to drop in threatening mate, and in this particular position, we're going to check our candidate move process here. We have one unused rook. We have a knight that is pinned to a queen. We have threats of mate on h7. So take 45 seconds or a brief pause in order to choose moves for yourself in this position that you think will get the job done.
Brush my teeth, I put the cap back on.
And it's at this moment that we have to actually choose how we're going to continue the game, and Smyslov chooses the move rook to g3. Now, of course, there's nothing wrong with centralizing a rook to go after the d6 pawn, or perhaps even placing the rook on f1 to maximize the pressure on the f file. But the move rook to g3 threatens the immediate queen takes h7 check, and after rook takes h7, rook to g8 checkmate. It somewhat forces the move. Bishop takes f6, and after queen takes f6, the threat of mate on g7 forces the rook to defend. And it's at this moment that we might need to choose how we're going to continue the attack in this position. Let's take a pause for a brief moment as we once again stretch our candidate move choices. Before we make any hasty decisions, before we rush into a move or play a move without thinking, remember what I said about natural moves. We definitely have to find out where are the weaknesses, what are our opponent's best or worst placed pieces, what is our opponent's intention, and decide on what we're going to be doing next. And in this particular moment, we have the move, which is perfectly logical, and I'm going to re-emphasize that you cannot continue a game without the 10 points of material that constitute the rooks. The stronger player often gets the rooks to the right squares faster and better than the opponent. This is not entirely true in this particular game, as Black was forced into a rather defensive move, but rook to d1 puts pressure on d6. Black makes one more bid for bringing his queen into the defense with queen to f8 after the move d5. And rather than playing d5, rook takes d5, allowing queen to f8, Smyslov closes out the game with the rather decisive rook takes g7 first. And of course, it's also possible to play e takes d5 and win the game in this manner. But rather than play in that manner, the rook takes g7, rook takes g7, rook takes d5 sort of forces either winning the queen or mate on d8. So unfortunate that he doesn't have anything. Of course, in this particular position, if the queen retreats to f8, the pin will be rather devastating. That brings to a close Smyslov-Rudakovsky, a very fine positional masterpiece, executing the use of the rooks and the bishops along open files and diagonals, the queen relocation maneuver, the outposting of the knight on d5. I hope you enjoyed this game. Please like and subscribe to this video. Like this video and subscribe to this channel if you have the time, and thank you so much. We are going to pass this one on to at least one other streamer who I thought was streaming, but I don't see them on just yet. But perhaps we'll send everybody back to Jack Sarkissian, as we only have two at the moment. Now, perhaps we'll send everybody over to the ever so lovely, quiet, and diligent the Chestina for the end of this particular video. Thank you for being here. I hope you enjoyed this end game instructional, or this middle game instructional. From the transition to the middle game, we didn't really reach an end game, but we will see a little bit of an end game in short order in a coming video. Thank you so much for being here. Cheers and ciao.